Get comfortable. Close your eyes if you'd like. This is a story about an island, about survival, and about the strange mercy of being found by something you never knew was looking for you. They spent a full day at the oceanic wreckage site. They explored the surrounding area in pairs, moving outward from the fuselage in widening arcs, looking for anything useful. Fresh water, tools, more food, any sign of what had come before them. They found nothing. The jungle beyond the clearing was just jungle, dense and indifferent, no different from the miles they had already walked through. Whatever the island had for them was in that clearing and nowhere else. They packed before dawn the next morning. Coconuts and papayas, as many as each person could carry. It was awkward cargo. Coconuts are heavy and round and do not want to be organized. But nobody complained. They had been on reduced rations long enough to understand that bulk is a kind of wealth. The manifest has been the center of conversation every evening since they found it. Questions mostly. Who were these people? When did they crash here? Were any of them still alive? More than one person in the group found it difficult to accept that two separate oceanic flights had gone down on the same island. Zach and Elise had a theory that the names on the manifest were survivors and that maybe some of them were still out there somewhere. Renata didn't share that hope, but she kept it to herself. She didn't want to close off the minds of the twins. Reed said nothing and stayed awake at night, trying to reconcile what he already knew with what he was still learning. And Haruki kept coming back to one name in particular: Hugo Reyes. Row 20, Seat C. Joel had weighed in once, gently poking holes in Zach and Elise's theory. He didn't believe the original survivors were still alive. But that wasn't how he actually felt. Deep down, Joel was more of a glass-half-full type. He just couldn't afford to show that right now. He had a persona to maintain, one that had been years in the making, long before the crash. Joel had been part of the group since the first day of the expedition. He occupied the middle of it, not at the front with Patrice, not at the back with Haruki and the twins, but somewhere in between. Present, capable, quietly unremarkable, which is exactly what a man who has spent years being paid to disappear into groups learns to be. He was in his early 50s, broad-shouldered, conventionally attractive for a man his age. Salt and pepper hair. A goatee that had grown into a full beard over the weeks on the island. Dark, expressive eyes that gave him a quality people found hard to place. He had a Boston accent that surfaced when he was tired or off guard, rounded vowels he had never quite let go of despite 20 years of working in other cities. He had a way of asking questions that sounded like conversation and produced information. He volunteered for this expedition without hesitation when Renata raised it. Reed had noted that at the time. He was still thinking about it. Reed and Joel had been gravitating toward each other the way careful people gravitate toward other careful people. Slowly, without announcement, finding each other at the fire after the others went to sleep, talking about nothing specific for long enough that the not specificity became its own kind of trust. Reed didn't know exactly what Joel was. Joel didn't know exactly what Reed was. They were both aware of this on some level, and it had become the unspoken foundation of a friendship that was more honest for what it didn't say than for what it did. And then there was Devin, 25 years old, close in age to Zach and Elise, but more settled somehow. He processed the world through systems and logic, and he had been quietly, intensely fascinated by this island since the first day, not out of fear, but because everything here violated the rules he had spent his life learning. Before the crash, he worked in IT infrastructure, not help desk, not consumer tech. The kind of deep systems work that involves understanding how information moves through hardware at a level most people never stop to think about. He had been largely quiet throughout the expedition, watching, cataloguing, building a model in his head that the rest of the group couldn't see yet. On the morning of the second day of walking after the wreckage, Reed stops. He stands very still in the middle of the path, his head slightly tilted. Everyone behind him reads the body language and stops too. He doesn't explain. He is feeling the electromagnetic gradient again. The hum behind the eyes, the pull that has been building since the afternoon before. It tells him something, in a language his training gave him, and the island has been refining ever since he arrived. This way, he says, and turns off the path into the undergrowth. Flashback. Marcus. At the Cuyahoga County Courthouse, Marcus sits next to his client, who is crying. This isn't unusual. Clients cry. They spend months suspended in a process they don't understand, and when they finally arrive at the moment where the outcome becomes real, they cry. Marcus has been a public defender for 2 years. He has learned that the crying is not something to manage. You sit with it. You let it have its own duration. His client is 22 years old, charged with aggravated assault. Marcus has spent 6 weeks building what he believes is a sound argument. The evidence is circumstantial. The identification is weak. There's a discrepancy on the 3rd page of the arresting officer's report that he has been turning over in his mind like a stone he keeps finding in his shoe. He wins the case. His client goes home. Marcus sits in the parking garage for 20 minutes before starting his car. He is thinking about his father. Not a father he knows. He has never known his father. That's a thing he has arranged his life around, the way you arrange furniture around a missing wall. You don't talk about it. You design the space so the absence doesn't announce itself. He knows his father's name. His mother gave it to him when he was 19. She'd been holding it a long time and the container wasn't going to hold much longer. "James Ford," she said. "You get the charm from him. The rest is you." He looked up the name. It wasn't difficult. James Ford had a record, a long one. It started with minor fraud in his early 20s and moved into more sophisticated territory over time. He was very good at understanding what people wanted and offering it to them in a form that cost them more than they realized. He did time. He had various names. He was a ghost for years. And then, improbably, his name appeared in connection with a plane crash in the South Pacific, a rescue that made news precisely because it made no sense, and then nothing. The trail went cold in the way that deliberate trails go cold. Marcus filed the information away. He had a caseload. He had a genuine belief that the system he worked within, flawed as it was worth his best efforts. He held that belief for another 14 months. Then he sat across from a man named Daniel who had been charged with mortgage fraud. And in the course of reviewing the discovery materials, he understood, clearly the way he always understood things, that Daniel had in fact done it, had done it extensively, and was going to walk because the prosecution had made an evidentiary error that Marcus was professionally obligated to exploit. He sat in the conference room and stared at the materials. He thought about his client crying in the holding room, about the woman whose identification was weak, about the discrepancy on page 3. He thought, the story is whatever you need it to be. The evidence is whatever you choose to show. The audience goes where you lead them. And then he thought, I have been leading them in the right direction. But the direction isn't the point. The leading is the point. The skill is the point. And the skill works the same way regardless of which direction you're going. He didn't act on this thought immediately. He isn't that kind of person. The kind who pivots cleanly in a single moment. The pivot was gradual. A series of small decisions that each seemed independent, until you looked at them from a distance and understood they formed a line. He had been Julian Ford then. That was the name in the wallet. The name he used before Marcus Webb, before the public defender's office, before he decided to give the gift one more honest try. He discovered, as he had perhaps always suspected, that the gift didn't distinguish between honest and dishonest. It was just the gift. It belonged to him the way the charm belonged to him, the way the instinct for narrative belonged to him, the longing for a life lived beyond the rules he had spent years studying. It consumed him. He got it from his father. The rest, as his mother said, was him. Part 1. The dish. They smell it before they see it. Something metallic and mineral. The smell of old machinery. Of concrete that has been sealed for a very long time, like opening a basement that hasn't been opened in years. Then the undergrowth thins, not naturally, in a way that suggests something beneath the soil is discouraging root systems. And then the tree line simply ends. The dish is enormous. That is the first thing. The scale of it, out of proportion with everything that has come before it in this jungle, where weeks of trees and heat have steadily reduced the human scale of things. A satellite dish mounted on a concrete base, pointed at a specific spot in the sky it has been holding for however many years it has been out here. The dish itself is overgrown. Vines in the struts, a nest built in the curve of it, moss and discoloration across the surface. But the structure beneath is intact. The mount is intact. The cable running from the base down into the earth toward a low concrete building 30 meters away appears to be intact. Reed is already moving toward the building. The door is metal, flush with the concrete, with a wheel lock that has seized up with corrosion. Marcus gets to it first. He has a piece of salvaged wreckage he has been using as a pry bar, and he applies it with the patience of someone who has learned that most things yield eventually, if you find the right angle. The wheel turns. The door opens inward on hinges that protest, but hold. The air that comes out is stale and cool, the particular coolness of underground spaces sealed away from the island's heat. They stand at the entrance and let their eyes adjust. The room is larger than the exterior suggested. The main space drops half a level below grade. Banks of equipment line 3 walls, radio transmitters, signal processors, a satellite uplink console with its array of dials and switches, and a monitor dark and dusty above the keyboard. On one wall, a large map of the surrounding ocean, with transmission arcs drawn in faded red. On another wall, a symbol, an eye with a flame at its center. The same institutional style as the other Dharma markings they have found, but larger, more deliberate, less like a label and more like a declaration. Devin stands in front of the uplink console for a long time. He reaches out and touches it, not operating it, just touching it. The way you touch something you have been reading about your whole life and have finally arrived in front of. Then he says, very quietly, "This is it." Renata asks if it can work. He takes his time answering, He examines the console, the connections, the state of the equipment. The hardware is decades old. Some of it is beyond recovery. Corrosion has taken components that can't be replaced. But the core transmitter appears intact in the way that things on this island are intact when the island has decided to keep them. If there is a power source they can connect to, he says, then yes, it can work. He pulls a panel off the back of one of the signal processors and reads the circuitry inside with the calm attention of someone who understands exactly what they're looking at. Most of the analog transmission hardware is intact, he says, without looking up. Corrosion on the connectors, but nothing that can't be worked around. He says it plainly, not a boast, just a reading of what is in front of him. Then he finds the secondary panel in the far corner, set into the wall at waist height. A single switch, a row of indicator lights. He brushes it clear of dust and reads the label above it. Auxiliary power, he says. External feed. Part 2. The transmission. It is Reed who finds the lockbox. It is bolted to the underside of the main console. Small. Metal. The combination lock long since corroded open. Inside, wrapped in a cloth that has yellowed but held its shape. A journal. Hard-bound. The cover dark and water-stained at the edges, but intact. Reed opens it to the first page. He reads the name written there. Small, precise handwriting, entirely composed. He goes still for a moment. Then he closes the journal and slips it into his pack in one unhurried motion, returning his attention to the uplink controls as though nothing happened. Across the room, Marcus watches this. He watches Reed open the lockbox. Watches his face as he reads the first page. Watches the stillness cross it and then get composed away. He watches the journal go into the pack. He says nothing. He files it. The external feed cable runs north, buried but traceable by a slight depression in the ground heading toward the mountain. Reed follows it 50 meters before it becomes ambiguous. He comes back and stands at the auxiliary panel. The cable runs to a power source somewhere north, he tells the group. Something the Dharma program built that is still running, or that the island has kept running, which is a distinction he is no longer sure matters. If the source is still active, the power may already be available. They just need to close the circuit. Meanwhile, Devin has worked his way to the uplink console. He is cleaning the connector ports with a strip of cloth torn from his pack lining, blowing dust from the interface pins with methodical patience. The satellite alignment hardware looks intact, he says. If they get power, he thinks he can get the dish to respond to commands. Marcus cuts in. His voice is raised just enough for everyone to hear. He doesn't think they should do this. Everyone looks at him. It isn't entirely surprising. He has been skeptical since they arrived. But the flatness of it, the speed, the absence of any preamble, it gives the words a weight that stops the room. The equipment is God knows how old, he continues, folding his arms. He doesn't think it will work. And even if it does, Reed himself said this island has been kept hidden for decades. If that's true, what are the odds that anyone on the outside is monitoring a distress frequency from an island that doesn't exist? They could transmit forever, and nobody might ever hear it. Why waste the time? Renata responds. Her posture straightens the way it does when she's about to take control of a debate. That makes no sense, she says. Just because the odds are small doesn't mean they're zero. Nobody in this group thinks this is going to automatically lead to rescue. But none of this is accidental. Someone built this station. Someone intended to use it to reach the outside world. It would be a failure of judgment to walk away from that now. Marcus raises his voice a level. Everyone keeps talking about this island like it's a living, breathing thing, he says. Like it's guiding them. Like there's some divine reason we're all here. He looks around the group. Maybe there isn't. Maybe they just have terrible luck. Maybe this is karma. Maybe it's our own personal hell and there is no reason, no message, no purpose, no island choosing anyone for anything. And if that's true, he says, broadcasting their location to the world isn't wisdom. It's wishful thinking. One thing I have learned in life, when your expectations are low, you're never disappointed. The room is quiet. Then Haruki speaks from the back. He doesn't raise his voice. He never raises his voice. There is a reason, he says simply, with the certainty he has carried since the first node, since the earthquake, since Hugo Reyes stood at the edge of a clearing and pointed north. He is not looking at Renata or Reed. He is looking at Marcus. You just have to find it in yourself first. Marcus looks at him. I'm sorry, but I don't take life advice from a teenager. Reed steps in immediately. That's enough. He says it quietly, but with the kind of finality that doesn't need volume. He looks at Marcus. If you don't want to be part of this, you can wait outside. Or you can head back to base camp. But they are going to try to transmit, and he needs everyone who is staying to be focused. Marcus holds his gaze for a moment, then he turns and walks out without another word. The door swings behind him. Nobody says anything. Devin glances up from the console, reads the room and goes back to work. Joel waits a few minutes. Then he slips outside. Marcus is standing at the edge of the clearing, his back to the station, looking at the tree line. He doesn't turn around when Joel comes out. Joel stands beside him for a moment without saying anything. Then he reaches into the front pocket of his jacket and produces a pack of cigarettes, slightly crumpled, down to its last 4. He has been rationing them since the crash with the discipline of someone who understands that when the last one is gone, it is gone. He shakes one out and offers it. Marcus looks at it. Then he takes it. Joel puts one in his own mouth and produces a lighter that still works, which is a small miracle on this island. He lights Marcus's first, then his own. They stand in the clearing beside the enormous satellite dish and smoke, in silence for a moment. The way people smoke when what they need is not conversation, but company. For what it's worth, Joel says he isn't sure it'll work either. Marcus looks at him. Joel shrugs. Decades-old equipment, an island that doesn't exist, a satellite that may or may not still be in the right position. He draws on the cigarette. It's a lot of assumptions stacked on top of each other. Marcus is quiet for a moment. Then he says it's not just whether it works, it's the whole thing. The way they talk about it in there. Like the island wants them to find things. Like there's a plan. He shakes his head. He spent his whole life watching people convince themselves there's a reason for things when really there are just things. He looks at the dish. That's Cold War era hardware someone bolted to a concrete pad decades ago. It is not a gift. Joel says, yeah, flat. Neither agreeing nor disagreeing. Just listening. Marcus asks where Joel is from. Boston, Joel says. You? Atlanta. Born there. Worked there a long time. Marcus says it the way people compress a chapter of their lives into a sentence when they don't intend to open it further. What did you do? Joel asks. Law, Marcus says. For a while. He takes a long drag, then other things, odd jobs here and there. Joel nods. He doesn't push. He smokes and looks at the tree line and lets the silence do the work. After a while, Marcus asks if Joel is married. Used to be, Joel says. His ex-wife probably preferred he didn't tell people, so she could act like it never happened. But he doesn't blame her. Marcus snorts. He never had much luck with women in Atlanta either, he says. Joel nods. Maybe they have more in common than he would have expected. These are good, Marcus says, looking at what's left of the cigarette. Last pack, Joel tells him, trying to make them last. Marcus moves to hand back the butt, the instinct of someone who has smoked socially long enough to know the etiquette. Joel waves it off. Marcus nods once, the small acknowledgement of someone who has been offered something and accepted it fully. They stand there until the cigarettes are done. Then Marcus says, without any particular emotion, he thinks he's going to head back to base camp. There's nothing out here for him. Probably the right call, Joel says. He'll join the group when it's time. He's had about enough of the hiking. They stand together a few quiet moments longer. Then they go back inside. Reed reaches for the switch and pauses for 1 second. The habit of a man who has learned that on this island, 1 second of consideration before an irreversible action is the minimum responsible interval. Then he throws it. The indicator lights come on. Not all of them. 4 of the 7. A partial connection. The island giving what it has kept rather than what was originally installed. But 4 is enough. 4 means the transmitter has power. 4 means the satellite dish will move on command. 4 means something in the north is still doing what it was designed to do. Decades after the program that built it was closed and classified and ceased to officially exist. Devin is already at the uplink console. His hands move across the controls with the confidence of someone reading a system's architecture and working with it rather than against it. The monitor flickers. Once. Twice. Then it resolves. A carrier signal. A frequency. Devin exhales once, quietly. There it is, he says. Reed tells the group they have transmission capability. He can't guarantee anyone will receive them. He can't guarantee the satellite is still in position to relay the signal. But the station is transmitting. Whatever they say into this equipment, they can say it to the world. Whether the world is listening is another matter. Renata has spent the last hour working on what to say, sitting against the wall with a piece of salvaged cardstock, writing and crossing out and writing again. She arrives at something spare. The flight number. The survivor count. A set of geographic coordinates that Reed calculates from the station's known position and the island's estimated location relative to the original flight path. No explanation of the island. No mention of what they've found here. Just the facts that matter. We are here, we are alive. This is where here is. Devin sets the message to loop. Reed sets the frequency to the international distress band. They check the satellite alignment together, Devin reading the positioning data aloud, Reed confirming the calculation. Then Devin presses send. The room is very quiet. The indicator lights hold their 4 out of 7 steadiness. Outside, the satellite dish makes a sound. A mechanical groan, a slow rotation, orienting itself to the uplink command. Finding its angle. Reaching. Part 3. Reed and Marcus. It happens that evening. The others have gone outside to make camp in the clearing beside the station. Reed stays at the console. He waits. After a while, Marcus comes back in alone. Reed doesn't look up right away. He lets the silence do some of the work. Then he says, "You were very certain the equipment wouldn't work." Marcus says he has his reasons. "I'm sure you do," Reed says. Then he looks up. He asks whether Marcus doesn't have anyone back home he would want to reach. Anyone he would want to know he was alive. Marcus is quiet. A range of emotions moves across his face. Too complex to read immediately. Then they're gone. The hardened features return. "Maybe it's better if people think I'm dead," he says. Reed hadn't expected that. He doesn't answer immediately. He calculates. Maybe it's slipped. Maybe it was intentional. Either way, it is an opening. Who would it be better for, Reed asks. Marcus or Julian? Something moves across Marcus's face. It is brief and quickly suppressed, but Reed catches it. He has spent years learning to read this kind of thing. "I don't know what you're talking about," Marcus says. Reed shakes his head. He tells Marcus he found the ID in his wallet days ago. The name on it does not match the name he gave the group. Marcus's expression doesn't change. He asks what Reed wants. "Nothing," Reed says. He is telling Marcus what he knows because the people sharing this island deserve to know who they are sharing it with. He means no ill intent, but he can't pretend not to be curious. Something shifts in Marcus's attention. He says quietly that Reed should be careful about what he decides to do with information on this island. He lets that land. Then he says, "I want to know what's in the journal." Reed says nothing. Marcus continues. From the lockbox, under the console, Reed read the first page and put it in his pack. "I watched you," Marcus says. "Evenly, without heat. I'm not accusing you of anything. I'm asking what you found and why you're holding it." The transmitter hums. The indicator lights. Hold. Reed says he is still working out what it means. When he has, he will share it. Marcus looks at him for a long moment. Then he says, "Be careful what you do with information on this island." He says it with a weight that means more than the words. Then he goes outside. Reed stays at the console. He sits with the blue light of the monitor and adds everything to his inventory. The name in the wallet, the argument against transmitting, the journal, the warning that wasn't quite a warning. He thinks about what a man who knows he is being watched chooses to show, and what he chooses to hide. We are both holding something, he thinks. The question is, which of us is holding the more dangerous thing? Flashback. Joel. Joel is sitting in a rented sedan outside a storage facility in an industrial district of Atlanta. He has been doing this for 2 months. The number of cigarettes he has gone through in that time would probably be record-breaking. After his shifts, he goes back to the apartment the department leases for him. He lives as a commercial contractor named Travis Pritchard, who relocated from Boston for work. It's close enough to true that the details hold up. He did grow up in Boston. He does know enough about construction to answer questions. And the rounded vowels of his accent, which he has never quite let go of despite 20 years of working in other cities, tend to make people trust him faster than they otherwise might. That part is useful. He has been investigating a man named Marcus Webb from a distance. That is the part that matters. Always from a distance. The case is not at the stage where contact is advisable. His handler has been clear about this. Joel has agreed because he is good at his job, and part of being good at his job is understanding that the moment you make yourself visible to the subject starts managing you. So Joel watches. He builds the file from surveillance and financial records and the careful, patient accumulation of second-hand detail. What he has learned about Marcus Webb from a distance is this: the man is intelligent, careful, and very good at being the kind of person that other people trust. Joel has watched him work a room from across a bar, watched him talk his way out of a parking dispute with the easy charm of someone who has never needed to raise his voice. He has watched him laugh, really laugh, with his whole face, at something a stranger said, and thought, that's real. That's not performed. Which is the most unsettling thing about Marcus Webb. The warmth is real, the charm is real, the care he appears to have for people around him appears to be genuinely felt, and he has still, by Joel's assessment, been running a sophisticated financial con for the better part of 4 years. Joel has not spoken a single word to him. He has been in the same room 3 times, a bar, a coffee shop, a parking garage, and on each occasion has positioned himself at sufficient remove to observe without being observed. Marcus Webb has never looked at him. Joel is confident of this in the way you are confident of things you have been trained to verify. On the 2nd week of month 2, Joel gets a call. The investigation is being absorbed into a federal task force. His handler is being reassigned. The file is being transferred to another office, where it will wait in a queue behind investigations that are further along. Joel sits in the sedan and looks at the storage facility and thinks about how thin the file is for 2 months of work. Not because Marcus hasn't done anything, because he has done everything carefully. He books the flight back to Boston the following week. His department chief has an overseas case. He believes only Joel can handle it. Joel hates long-distance travel, especially by plane. But he agrees. He has nothing better to do. He does not know that Marcus Webb is on the same flight. He finds this out in the boarding line at the gate, when he turns to check his phone and sees 4 people ahead of him, a face he knows from weeks of photographs and surveillance footage, a face he has never seen in direct proximity. Marcus Webb, in person, closer than Joel has ever been. For 1 fraction of a second, something moves across Marcus's face as his eyes land on Joel. A calculation, quick and resolved before it becomes visible. Then he turns back around without acknowledgement. Joel goes very still. He has never been within Marcus's eye line before. He should not be recognizable. There is no reason for that calculation to have happened, unless Marcus's sensitivity to being watched extends to something Joel doesn't have a name for yet. Some instinct developed through long exposure to people who are not what they say they are. Joel boards the plane. He sits a few rows behind Marcus. He does not introduce himself, does not make eye contact. He takes out a book and does not read a single word of it. He does not know that the turbulence is coming. He does not know that Reed Farrow, sitting in row 11 with a book he is also not reading, will become the first person on this island he trusts with the real version of who he is. He does not know any of what is coming. He just sits there behind Marcus Webb and thinks about what it means that the calculation happened at all. Part 4. The schematic. It is Reed who notices it. On the secondary section of the map, below the ocean coverage arcs in a space he had been reading as decorative, there is a smaller diagram he has not properly registered until now. He steps closer and brushes the dust from it with the back of his hand. It is the island. Not a geographic map, not coastlines and elevation, a schematic, a diagram of the island as a system, positions marked at 23 points around a central convergence. The positions are exact. He knows this because he has seen Diaz's hand-drawn copy of the bunker map, and the correspondence between the two is not approximate. It is precise. From each position, a line runs to the center, not a physical line, not a cable or a path, an energy line, a representation of the electromagnetic relationship between each stone and whatever sits at the island's heart. And at the central point, where all 23 lines converge, there is a symbol he has not seen before. Not the eye with the flame, not any Dharma station marking, something older, something that was here before the program arrived and named things and built stations on top of them. He calls Renata over. She stands beside him and looks at it for a long time without speaking. Then Reed begins to explain, carefully, in the voice he uses when he is working out something important in real time. The nodes are not independent, he tells her. Whatever happened when Haruki touched the stone was not an isolated event. The electromagnetic properties of this island are not a feature of the nodes. The nodes are access points to something larger, something at the center. Renata is silent as she takes it in. Reed breaks the silence. He says he thinks they need to be very careful about what they do next, and that they need to talk to the others. Part 5. The Fracture. The argument begins the following morning. It is Patrice who names it first, directly, without preface, the way she does most things. She says they should go back to base camp. They have been in the interior for close to 2 weeks. The food is nearly spent. The water rationing is affecting everyone's judgment. And they have found something enormous. The flame station, the transmission, the node schematic, that the full group needs to know about. The people they left behind deserve to know what has been found. The decisions about what to do next cannot be made without them. Zach says he agrees. Elise nods, which is how Elise agrees. Marcus says he agrees with Patrice, simply, from near the door. The absence of any qualification is itself a kind of information. Joel says he'll tag along. He adds that making camp beside a station that is now transmitting on an international distress frequency, while the cable running north remains unexplored, is not a stable situation. He says it calmly. Reed looks at him a beat longer than the statement requires. Renata says they are not finished here. She suggests some of them stay behind to monitor the transmission in case anything comes in. The room goes quiet. Reed says he agrees with Renata, that he is willing to stay. Renata nods, not having expected to find herself on the same side as Reed, but accepting it. Haruki says he agrees too, without elaboration. Devin raises his hand and volunteers to stay as well. Marcus says, without drama, "You 4 stay. The rest of us go back." And that is that. Patrice, Zach, Elise, Marcus and Joel on one side. Renata, Reed, Devin and Haruki on the other. The group divides itself, not with anger, not with recrimination, but with the quiet practicality of people who have been through enough together to know that agreement is sometimes less useful than decision. Reed looks at the split. Then he looks at Joel. Something passes between them. Brief, private, requiring no explanation. "Let's get a move on," Patrice says. Before they depart, Joel finds Reed at the auxiliary panel. The others are packing, gathering what they need for the walk back. Joel and Reed sit together in the blue light of the monitor for a while, without saying much. It has become their habit, this quality of silence that contains more than most conversations. "Good luck with everything here," Joel says. A long pause, the carrier signal hums. "Appreciate it," Reed says. He stands and extends his hand. When their hands meet, Reed feels it, not quite electricity, a soft, warm current, something he does not expect and cannot immediately categorize. Joel holds the grip a beat longer than a handshake requires. He does not break eye contact. Reed files the sensation alongside everything else he cannot yet explain. Then the moment is over. Joel clears his throat, nods once, and backs out of the door. Patrice leads them out. Zach, Elise, Marcus, Joel, and 2 others who decided to head back. They take the manifest. 2 of the 3 remaining water canteens. Patrice carries the medical supplies without being asked. Nobody comments on this because they all understand it is simply the right thing. Joel is the last one through the tree line. He stops at the edge and looks back at Reed, who is standing at the station door. Something passes between them. Not a word, not a gesture. Just the look of 2 people who have agreed to continue a conversation at a later point, and who are each, privately, uncertain whether that later point will come. Then Joel is gone. The jungle closes behind them. Later that evening, as the sun slips low behind the trees into quiet darkness, Reed sits at the console. The loop plays. The carrier signal holds its frequency into a sky that may or may not contain someone who is listening. He takes out the journal. The handwriting is small and precise and entirely composed, the handwriting of a man who remained orderly even at the end of things. The name on the first page is Benjamin Linus. Reed had known the name from the files, the way you know a name that appears in enough classified documents that it becomes a category rather than a person, associated with the island, with what came after Dharma, with a group called the Others. He had not expected to hold the man's journal in his hands. He reads, Ben Linus writes about the island the way a man writes about the place he grew up, with authority and with grief, and with the particular honesty that comes from having chosen a thing many times and needing to justify that choice to no one but himself. He writes about the nodes. He calls them by a different name, an older one, with the familiarity of someone who has walked past them for decades. Near the back, in entries that grow shorter and more compressed, he writes, "The island is not finished. What we did here, what all of us did on every side of every argument, was not the end of anything. It was a door being held open." Reed sets the journal down and looks at the monitor. He thinks about the schematic, about 23 lines converging on a point none of them have reached. He thinks about the current he felt when Joel's hand met his, about Marcus's face when the wallet came up. He thinks about a door being held open and about who, specifically, it might be being held open for. Outside, somewhere in the jungle beyond the clearing, the sound returns. Low, rhythmic. Wrong in a way that has no natural explanation. It moves around the clearing the way weather moves around a coast. Patient, wide, at a distance that might be 50 meters or might be much further. Renata, sleeping near the door, goes very still without waking. Haruki, who was not sleeping, sits up and listens. Then it stops. All at once, the way it always stops, leaving behind it that feeling, the quality of something that has noted their presence without finding it sufficient reason to do anything further. Not yet. Haruki lies back down. He does not sleep. The island holds them. It has held stranger things. It has held them all longer than any of them know. Somewhere in the static of a frequency no one has monitored in decades, a transmission moves outward from an island that does not exist, carrying 46 names and a set of coordinates, and the simple, extraordinary fact that they are still here. The island keeps what it wants to keep. It has not finished with any of them yet. Sleep well. The island will be here when you wake up. It always is.